The weight of gold. A young boy, burdened by the legacy of his family's empire, finds himself navigating a world that both admires and judges him for who he is. Will he succumb to the pressures of expectation, or will he forge his own path? Join young Alexander on this journey of self-discovery. Let us know where you're reading from. We love hearing from you. Chapter 1, Flight. The private jet sliced through the twilight sky, a polished obsidian arrow aimed at the unseen horizon. Inside, nestled in the supple leather of a first-class seat, 10-year-old Alexander stared out the window. The lights of Manhattan, once a vibrant tapestry of life, shrunk into a shimmering, indistinguishable mass below. A cool, almost detached sensation settled over him. He was alone, physically distanced from everything familiar, yet his mind felt crowded. Fragments of his father's pronouncements, his grandfather's anecdotes, and the constant hum of familial expectation bounced around his thoughts. Alexander, a Sterling never falters. His father, Julian, the CEO of Sterling Industries, had said 1,000 times. His voice, always a careful balance of authority and affection, echoed now in the silent cabin. The world watches us, scrutinizes our every move. Always remember to conduct yourself with unwavering dignity. Alexander had absorbed these words, the pressure building within him like an unseen storm. He felt the weight of the Sterling name, the expectation of leadership, success, and impeccable conduct pressing down on him. It was a legacy of both privilege and responsibility, a weight too heavy for his small shoulders, he often felt. The cabin was a haven of polished wood, soft lighting, and hushed conversations. Flight attendants moved with practiced grace, their smiles perfectly calibrated. Yet, Alexander felt disconnected, separated by an invisible barrier. He was a child in a world of adults, a silent observer in a domain of power. A woman, impeccable in a designer suit, paused beside his seat. Her eyes, the color of ice, narrowed slightly as they focused on him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying a subtle edge of disapproval. "Are you quite sure you're meant to be here, young man?" Alexander blinked, surprised by the directness of her question. "Yes, ma'am. I'm traveling alone. My parents arranged it." He kept his voice even, attempting to project the calm confidence his father always insisted upon. The woman's gaze lingered, evaluating him from the top of his neatly combed hair to the tips of his polished shoes. "First class is hardly a playground for children," she murmured, her tone laced with disdain. "Perhaps you've wandered in by mistake." A flush of heat rose in Alexander's cheeks. He straightened his back, pushing down the wave of insecurity that threatened to overwhelm him. "I belong here," he stated, his voice stronger now, his resolve hardening. "I have a ticket." The woman's lips tightened into a thin line. "I doubt that," she said, her voice colder. "A child like you alone, in first class. Preposterous." Something snapped within Alexander. The carefully constructed facade of composure crumbled, replaced by a surge of anger. "It's not preposterous," he retorted, his voice rising. "I have as much right to be here as you do." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Conversations died down, heads turned. Alexander felt a tremor run through him, a mix of defiance and fear. He knew he was being watched, judged, found wanting. The woman's eyes narrowed further, her expression hardening. Without warning, she raised her hand and struck Alexander across the face. The sound echoed in the hushed cabin, a sharp, stinging blow that reverberated through his entire being. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Alexander's cheek burned, his heart pounded in his chest. Passengers shifted in their seats, their discomfort palpable. The injustice of the act, the humiliation of being publicly assaulted, washed over him in a wave. He fought back tears, his small hands clenching into fists. He had been humiliated, belittled, and physically attacked. But something else was stirring within him, a simmering resentment that threatened to boil over. He would not be intimidated. He would not be silenced. He would not be defined by the expectations of others. He was Alexander Sterling, and he would not be broken. A passenger seated nearby, a man with kind eyes and a weary face, rose to his feet. "That's enough," he exclaimed, his voice sharp with indignation. "You can't just strike a child like that. It's appalling." Others chimed in, their voices rising in protest. The woman, now visibly shaken, stammered apologies, but her words sounded hollow, insincere. Alexander stood his ground, his chin lifted, his eyes fixed on the woman. He would not cry. He would not show weakness. He would not let her see the hurt she had inflicted. The pilot, alerted by the commotion, emerged from the cockpit. He assessed the situation with a practiced eye, his gaze moving from the woman to Alexander and back again. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Alexander took a deep breath, summoning his courage. She hit me," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "because she didn't think I belonged here." The pilot's eyes hardened. He turned to the woman, his expression stern. "Is this true?" The woman, her face pale, could only nod in shame. The pilot turned back to Alexander, his gaze softening slightly. "Young man," he said, "what's your name?" "Alexander Sterling," he replied, his voice clear and unwavering. The pilot's eyes widened in recognition. "Sterling," he repeated, glancing around the cabin. "As in, Julien Sterling. A ripple of surprise spread through the cabin. The passengers who had been so quick to judge him now looked at him with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. The pilot turned back to Alexander, his voice now filled with respect. "Well, Mr. Sterling," he said, "I apologize for what happened. You certainly have every right to be here." He then turned to the woman, his expression icy. "I think it would be best if you moved to another seat," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And I suggest you offer Mr. Sterling a sincere apology." The woman, thoroughly humiliated, mumbled an apology and hurried to the back of the plane. The pilot turned back to Alexander, offering a reassuring smile. "Are you all right, Mr. Sterling?" he asked. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Alexander nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine," he said. "Thank you." The pilot patted him on the shoulder. "Don't let this incident bother you," he said. "You handled yourself with remarkable poise. Your father would be proud." He then returned to the cockpit, leaving Alexander to grapple with the aftermath of the encounter. The sting on his cheek was a constant reminder of the humiliation he had endured. But beneath the pain, a new sense of strength was beginning to emerge. He had stood his ground, defended his dignity, and faced down prejudice. And in doing so, he had taken the first step on the long and challenging journey of becoming his own person, not just a reflection of his family's legacy. Chapter 2: Whispers of Gold. The plane continued its journey, the low thrum of the engines now a steady backdrop to Alexander's thoughts. He stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. The earlier incident replayed in his mind, each detail etched sharply in his memory. He had been judged, not for who he was, but for what he represented: wealth, privilege, and the burden of the Sterling name. It was a realization that stung more than the slap he had received. He was more than just Julian Sterling's son, more than just an heir to a vast empire. He was Alexander, a boy with his own hopes, dreams, and aspirations. He thought of his mother, Elizabeth, a woman of quiet grace and unwavering compassion. She had always encouraged him to be his own person, to explore his interests, and to cultivate his own values. She had warned him about the dangers of wealth and privilege, the temptation to become detached from the real world. "Alexander," she had said, "money can buy you many things, but it cannot buy you happiness, respect, or true friendship. Those things must be earned." Her words resonated with him now. He realized that he couldn't rely on his family's name or wealth to define him. He had to prove himself, to earn the respect of others, and to build a life based on his own merits. He looked around the cabin, noticing the subtle shifts in the passengers' behavior. Some avoided his gaze, their faces etched with embarrassment. Others offered tentative smiles, their eyes filled with a newfound respect. He saw the flight attendant who had served him earlier, her expression apologetic. She approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened. It was inexcusable." Alexander nodded, accepting her apology. "Thank you," he said. "Is there anything I can get you?" she asked. "Anything at all?" Alexander smiled. "Just a glass of water, please," he said. As she walked away, he realized that he had inadvertently gained a small measure of power. The Sterling name, once a burden, had become a shield, but he knew that he couldn't rely on it forever. He had to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, to earn respect through his actions and character. The flight attendant returned with his water, offering another apologetic smile. He took a sip, savoring the coolness as it washed over him. He was thirsty, not just for water, but for knowledge, understanding, and experience. He decided to use the rest of the flight to plan his next steps. He would be more assertive in his education, seeking out new challenges and opportunities. He would volunteer in his community, working to help those less fortunate. And he would strive to be a better person, someone worthy of the Sterling name, but not defined by it. The plane began its descent, the city lights growing larger and brighter. He felt a sense of anticipation, a feeling that he was on the cusp of something new. The incident on the plane had been a catalyst, forcing him to confront his identity and to chart his own course. As the plane touched down, he took a deep breath, preparing himself for the world that awaited him. He was Alexander Sterling, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 3. Arrival and Echoes. The airport terminal buzzed with activity. The cacophony of announcements, the rolling of suitcases, and the chatter of voices created a symphony of organized chaos. Alexander navigated the crowds, his senses heightened, his awareness sharpened by the events of the flight. He spotted his chauffeur, a tall, imposing figure named Jenkins, standing patiently near the baggage claim. Jenkins had been with the Sterling family for years, a silent and loyal presence. He offered a respectful nod as Alexander approached. "Welcome back, Master Alexander," Jenkins said, his voice deep and resonant. "Thank you, Jenkins," Alexander replied, offering a polite smile. They collected his luggage and made their way to the waiting limousine, a sleek, black vehicle that exuded power and sophistication. Alexander settled into the plush leather seat, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He was safe, protected, and surrounded by the familiar trappings of his privileged life. But the comfort was fleeting. The incident on the plane had created a ripple effect, stirring up doubts and insecurities that lingered beneath the surface. He knew that he couldn't escape the weight of the Sterling name, but he could choose how to carry it. As the limousine sped through the city streets, Alexander gazed out the window, observing the world with a new perspective. He saw the homeless huddled in doorways, the struggling families waiting at bus stops, and the tired faces of working people rushing to their jobs. He realized that his life was vastly different from theirs, that he had been given opportunities that they could only dream of. And with those opportunities came a responsibility to use his privilege to make a difference, to help those less fortunate, and to create a more just and equitable world. The limousine pulled up to the Sterling mansion, a sprawling estate that stood as a testament to his family's wealth and power. The house was grand and imposing, a symbol of their success and status. Alexander stepped out of the car, taking a deep breath of the crisp evening air. He was home, but he knew that he was no longer the same boy who had left. He had been transformed by his experience, challenged to confront his identity, and inspired to find his own path. He walked through the massive front doors, greeted by the warm and familiar faces of the household staff. They offered polite greetings, but he sensed a subtle change in their demeanor. They knew what had happened on the plane, and they were watching him, curious to see how he would react. He made his way to the library, a vast and imposing room filled with leather-bound books and antique furniture. His father, Julian, was waiting for him, seated behind a large mahogany desk. Julian Sterling was a man of imposing stature, with a sharp intellect and a commanding presence. He had built Sterling Industries into a global powerhouse, and he expected his son to follow in his footsteps. He looked up as Alexander entered the room, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Alexander," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I heard about what happened on the plane. Are you all right?" Alexander nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Dad," he said. "It was just an incident." Julian studied his son's face, his eyes searching for any sign of distress. "I'm glad you're not hurt," he said, "but I'm also proud of the way you handled yourself. You stood your ground, and you defended your dignity. That's what a sterling does." Alexander nodded, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of unease. He knew that his father valued strength and resilience, but he also sensed that he didn't fully understand what had happened. "Dad," he said, "it wasn't just about defending my dignity. It was about fairness, about treating people with respect, regardless of their background or status." Julian frowned slightly, his expression hardening. "I understand that," he said, "but you must also remember that the world is not always fair. People will judge you, they will try to take advantage of you, and they'll try to tear you down. You must be prepared to fight back, to protect what is yours." Alexander sighed. He knew that his father was trying to protect him, but he also felt that he was missing the point. He didn't want to fight back. He wanted to build bridges. He didn't want to protect what was his. He wanted to share what he had. "I know, Dad," he said, "but I also want to make the world a better place. I want to use my privilege to help others, to create opportunities for those less fortunate." Julian stared at his son for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That's admirable, Alexander," he said finally. "But don't let your idealism cloud your judgment. The world is a complex place, and it requires a clear head and a strong hand to navigate it." Alexander nodded, but he knew that he and his father were on different paths. He was determined to find his own way, to forge his own legacy, and to use his privilege to make a positive impact on the world. The evening ended with a quiet dinner with his parents. The conversation was polite but strained, the unspoken tension hanging heavy in the air. Alexander sensed that his parents were proud of him, but they were also wary of his newfound independence. After dinner, he retreated to his room, a lavish suite that felt more like a luxury apartment than a child's bedroom. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring out the window at the city lights. He felt a sense of loneliness, a feeling that he was caught between two worlds. He was a sterling, destined to inherit a vast empire, but he was also Alexander, a boy with his own dreams and aspirations. He knew that he had a long and challenging journey ahead of him. He would have to navigate the complex world of wealth and power, while staying true to his own values and principles. He would have to prove himself to earn the respect of others, and to build a life that was both meaningful and fulfilling. But he was ready for the challenge. He had been tested, he had been challenged, and he had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. He was Alexander Sterling, and he was ready to write his own story.